I get asked all the time, what are your camera settings for your images? Now I do put these settings on the images, but quite frankly, they change a lot. So instead of me telling you the settings that I use for this image or that image, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my ballpark settings that I always start out with when I get to a new location. But not only that, I'm also going to teach you to set up the camera so you can use your custom functions to get to your settings quickly. So the first thing we need to do is we go to full manual. Okay, if you're not using full manual yet, I would strongly suggest that you go to full manual. So the first thing I want to do is set it up for the flash. Now I don't need the flash on the camera to set it up. That's why I've not got them set up here yet. You look at your flash's manual and find out what your maximum sync speed is. So for me, that's 1/200th of a second. Now you can go lower than that if you want to add in some ambient light. However, the lower you go, the more chance you're going to have some camera shake in there. As we know, it's the flash that freezes the action, not the shutter. So that's 1/200th of a second. Next, you're going to have a look at your lens. Every lens and camera is completely different. What I like to do is I like to start with an f-stop that is the sharpest on the lens, and generally that's around f7, f8. So for this particular one, I'm using the IRIX 150mm today. I'm going to set that to f8. Now the ISO, that's different for everybody. Some people like 100, some people like other ISOs. I know for a fact that ISO 400 with this EOS R is a very nice setting. It has a little bit of noise and grain, which doesn't distract from the image, but it can also be cleaned up very easily using Topaz denoise. And because I'm using an ISO 400, it keeps the flash power down so that I get more shots per flash out of the flashes, out of their batteries. Next, I'm going to go to my drive mode and I'm going to go to a single shot. I only want to do single shot every time I press the shutter. Metering mode is evaluative metering. So I'm shooting in RAW format. I never shoot JPEG. I like to have creative freedom in post to be able to do whatever I want to. I'm shooting at a white balance of 5600 Kelvin. Now I don't adjust the white balance no matter what. And that is if I, basically, if I want to do a image stack of an insect, that white balance doesn't change. If you have auto white balance, it's going to change every time you take an image. And that's not good if you're going to try and do a focus stack. And the cropping is set to 4. So once that's done, I'm going to come into my settings now, and I'm going to save that as C1 on my settings. So at any time I can come to the mode on here, come to C1, and that will be the settings it will use. Then from there, depending on the situation, depending on the environment, the lighting, what I'm photographing, I will adjust the f-stop and the ISO accordingly to get the shot that I need. Now, what I want to do now we have a ballpark figure for the camera settings. This is for focus stacking if I'm not using the flash. I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to come to my drive mode and I'm going to switch that to a high speed continuous drive mode. We're going to double check our settings, metering modes, we have the white balance, just double check all of those. So we're going to be using natural light. When it comes to the shutter speed, I'm just going to leave that at 1/200th of a second. That will need to be adjusted at the scene or the time of the picture. However, my f-stop, I am going to reduce that to an f about 5.6. It's a very sharp f-stop. And the ISO will be set to 100. We want as least amount of noise and grain in that image because we want to stack the images. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come back into my settings again and I'm going to save that as a C2. So if we come back here now, and if you was to change all those settings when you're at a scene, let's say you're at a scene, you see a nice crab spider that's posing for a nice image and you want to get a focus stack, you've got to come into your menu. You've got to adjust your f-stop, you have to adjust your ISO, you have to adjust your shooting mode, which is the high-speed continuous. That's 3 different settings right there that you need to adjust. However, if you use your custom functions, it's 1, 2. 2 clicks and you've switched modes to focus stacking in natural light. So you've gone from a flash setup to a natural light setup in just 2 clicks. Now, we're going to keep those settings as they are, and I'm going to switch my options to video. So when we're in video, I'm going to switch over to manual, and we're going to come into our settings. Now I'm going to set my video mode to full HD, 60 frames a second. Same recording, we'll keep that as auto. We're going to turn off the digital image stabilization. I'm then going to come to my white balance, again, 5600 Kelvin. Canon log settings, I'm going to record in Canon log 8-bit. If you've got an external recorder, you can switch that to a 10-bit. View assist is on, and my characteristics is I've lowered the sharpness. I don't want that digital sharpness as much. I can control that in post afterwards to my pleasure rather than the camera baking it in. The autofocus on here is just going to be a normal square box. My shutter speed needs to be double my frame rate, so if I am recording at 60 frames a second, that shutter speed needs to be double, which is the nearest setting I can get is 1 to 125th of a second. My f-stop, I'm going to start that off at the widest setting, and then we'll adjust that as we go along. And the native ISO for video on the EOS R is 400. Check your camera's manual for your native video ISO recording. Okay, now what I want to do there is I'm going to set that as C3. So I'm going to come to my settings, go to my custom settings and register that setting as a C3. Now here's the key to the C3 setting. If I come back to C2, which is my focus stacking in natural light setting for the camera. If I see something that's interesting, if I press the record button, it will record using the settings from the video C3, which is the high definition, 60 frames a second in camera raw. So then without having to change settings, so you're not having to go to C3, I can instantly just start recording B-roll if I need to. But let's bear in mind that we have two more camera settings we can use. If we set back to our stills mode, we still have C3 that we can use, so you can use that for a different setting if you wish to. Maybe a high speed shutter speed for capturing birds in flight or something like that. But also your manual setting is also what I class as a custom setting, because that manual setting always remembers your settings that you used last. So there you go. I encourage you to go out now, have a look at your camera, set up your custom functions so that you can quickly switch modes on your camera so you don't miss your shot. I hope you found that useful. If you did, let me know in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are or what your settings are on your camera, and if indeed you do use your custom settings. Let me know in the comments below, but that's where I'm going to leave this video. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters for their continued support in helping me to bring you this free content. If you want to help support the channel and you like what I do, then check out the link in the description for my Patreon page. I want to thank you for getting to the end of this video, and again, as always, I'll see you on the next one. Now you can go lower than that if you want to add in some ambient and as we know, it's the flash that feeds. Metering mode is evaluative metering. I'm going to be stuck on this one for a while. Metering mode is evaluative. What is it? Evaluated. No, you buggers. Why don't you get electric bike instead? I'm shooting in RAW. That way I've got the create. I shouldn't have chosen a location close to a road, man. My colour temperature. Remember, a few years ago, we wouldn't even notice the plane, would we? We would just carry on and then have a problem in post, having to edit it. If you use your custom function.
That sounds like you said function.